I'm Zoe Bennett, 32, founder of Luminate AI Solutions, now worth $75 million. 8 years ago, I left home with nothing but a secondhand laptop and a stubborn dream. While my parents praised my sister the perfect doctor, they called my tech business a childish fantasy. For years, I secretly paid their mortgage, medical bills, and funded my dad's fake consulting job just so he'd feel dignified. When I finally revealed the truth, my father's face twisted with rage. "Get out, you worthless lowlife," he screamed. That day, I walked away forever from their approval, their limitations, and their narrow vision of success. I never imagined the day I revealed my success would end with my father screaming at me to get out of his house. But life rarely unfolds the way we script it in our minds. Last week, I sat across from my parents at their oak dining table, the same table where I'd spent my childhood dinners, being compared to my sister Eleanor, the golden child, the doctor, the perfect one. I had rehearsed my words 100 times. I thought they would be surprised, maybe even proud, when I told them, "Mom, Dad." I began my heart pounding so hard I could barely hear my own voice. I wanted to share something important. My company, Luminate AI Solutions, it was just valued at $75 million. For a moment, there was silence. My father's fork paused midway to his mouth. My mother blinked rapidly, processing what she had just heard. And Eleanor, seated across from me in her crisp navy dress, tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing as if I'd spoken in a foreign language. "What are you talking about?" My father finally said, his voice cold, flat, and heavy with skepticism. "My company?" I repeated, forcing my voice to stay steady. "The AI company I started 8 years ago, it's worth $75 million now. We have over 200 employees, clients across the country. We're changing how businesses understand their customers using predictive analytics and proprietary algorithms." I reached into my bag and pulled out the recent Forbes magazine featuring my company's latest innovation. I laid it gently on the table, the glossy cover catching the warm kitchen light. My father didn't even glance at it. Instead, he let out a bitter, scoffing laugh. "So, this is what you've been wasting your life on? Playing with computers? Is this some kind of scam, Zoe money laundering, selling personal data illegally?" The words punched the air out of my lungs. After all these years, after all the hidden sacrifices, working 16-hour days, coding until my eyes burned, eating ramen noodles to keep the lights on, this was his first assumption that my success was fraudulent. "No, Dad," I whispered. "It's real. It's legitimate. You can check our company filings, our patents, our contracts. Enough." His voice cut through me like a blade. His eyes, usually blank when directed at me, now burned with rage. "You've been lying to us, living like some low-life criminal while pretending to be a businesswoman. Get out. Get out of my house right now." For a second, the world seemed to blur around me. I could hear my mother's quiet sobs, the soft clink of Eleanor's spoon against her teacup, the hum of the refrigerator, the rain beginning to tap against the kitchen window. I stood up slowly, my legs trembling. Years of wanting his approval, years of bending and breaking myself to fit into his narrow definition of success, years of funding their lives in silence, all of it collapsed into a single moment of cold, crushing clarity. "Okay," I said softly, "if that's what you want." I gathered the documents, the magazine, the proof of everything I had built, and slipped them back into my bag. I looked at my mother's tear-streaked face, at Eleanor's tight-lipped expression, and finally at my father, who refused to meet my gaze. Then I walked out the door into the pouring rain. The chill soaked through my coat instantly, but I felt strangely light. As I reached my car and slid into the driver's seat, my hands still shaking, one realization echoed through my mind. All these years I thought my silence protected me from their judgment, but in truth, their judgment was never about what I achieved. It was about who I refused to become, a reflection of their expectations. That day, as I drove away from the only home I had ever known, I wasn't just leaving their house. I was finally walking away from their limitations, their dismissals, and their definition of worth. For the first time in my life, I felt free. People always assume that growing up with educated parents means you were loved for your mind. But in my house, intelligence wasn't love. It was currency. A currency I never seemed to have enough of. I grew up in Lakewood, a small Midwestern town where people proudly displayed their framed degrees like family portraits. Our house was filled with them. My father, Dr. Bennett, was a tenured economics professor at Lakewood University. He published papers that other professors quoted, spoke at conferences across the country, and taught packed lecture halls of eager undergrads who hung on his every word. At home, though, his words hung over me like a sentence. My mother, Deborah Bennett, was the principal of Lakewood High School. She walked the hallways in tailored suits, her heels clicking on linoleum floors, her eyes scanning for students out of uniform or slouching in class. She believed discipline was love. Structure was love. Rules were love. She ruled our home with the same philosophy. Then there was Eleanor, my older sister by 4 years. The perfect daughter, the prodigy. Her room was a gallery of trophies and ribbons, debate champion math league, winner science fair gold medalist. Her grades were flawless. Her hair was always perfectly straightened. Her sentences precise and confident, just like Dad's. At dinner conversations, word tests, I always seemed to fail. Eleanor got another A+ on her calculus exam. Dad would announce slicing his roast chicken with surgical precision. Zoe, what happened with that B in algebra? I would swallow my disappointment with a gulp of water, my cheeks burning. I'm trying, Dad. Try harder, he'd say, already moving on to discuss Eleanor's debate victory. Sometimes I wondered if they realized I was there at all. While Eleanor memorized anatomy charts for fun, I spent my afternoons making friendship bracelets and selling them to neighborhood kids. At 10 years old, I set up a craft stand in front of our driveway with a hand-painted sign that read, "Zoe's Creations, $1 each." When I proudly showed Mom my day's earnings, expecting praise for making $15 in an afternoon, she patted my head absent-mindedly. It's cute that you have a little hobby. Just don't let it distract you from real work. School is what matters. Dad wasn't so gentle. One evening, I showed him business cards I'd designed on our old desktop computer. They read, Zoe Bennett Neighborhood Tech Support. He didn't even look up from grading papers. Peddling trinkets and fixing people's computers won't get you into Princeton. This little phase needs to end before college applications. His words sliced through my chest like cold steel. Because to him, everything I did was just a phase, a distraction from the only path that mattered. The path in our family was simple. Excel academically, get into a prestigious university, earn an advanced degree, become someone respectable, a doctor, a lawyer, a professor like him. Entrepreneurship wasn't just discouraged, it was forbidden. Business was for people who couldn't handle real intellectual pursuits. I remember the day Eleanor got into medical school. My parents threw a huge party in our backyard, inviting professors, deans, neighbors. Strings of fairy lights glowed against the dusk. Dad raised a glass of champagne under the oak tree and declared to Eleanor for continuing the proud Bennett tradition of excellence. I stood in the shadows clutching my laptop, working on a website I was designing for a local bakery. No one noticed I wasn't clapping. That same week, I had won first place in a regional young entrepreneurs competition, but my parents hadn't come to the ceremony. They said they had faculty meetings. Later, I saw photos on Facebook of them laughing at a department dinner that night. I could get good grades when I wanted to. But sitting in classrooms memorizing theoretical concepts felt suffocating when my mind burned with ideas I wanted to test in the real world. By senior year of high school, the pressure felt like concrete poured over my chest. College application forms covered our dining table like placemats. My father hovered behind me, tapping his pen impatiently. Northwestern has an excellent economics program, he said, pushing the application toward me. Or Yale. Your grades aren't quite Ivy League, but my colleague on the admissions board might help. I looked up at him, my heart pounding so loudly I thought it would shatter the porcelain plates around us. Dad, I whispered, I'm not applying to college, at least not right away. The silence that followed was so heavy I thought it might crush me. My mother dropped her fork with a sharp clang. My father's face flushed an angry crimson. That is not an option. He finally said, his voice icy calm. No child of mine will throw away their education for some childish fantasy. This ridiculous business idea ends now. But something inside me refused to bend this time. I had saved money fixing neighbors' computers and selling crafts online. I had a business plan. I had contacts with local entrepreneurs. And for the first time, I felt a flicker of something dangerously close to rebellion. I'm going to start my own company, I said, my voice shaking. If it doesn't work in 2 years, I'll reconsider college. Their response was swift and final. If I refused college, I would receive no support, financial or emotional. They were certain I would fail, certain I'd come crawling back for their approval, and maybe in some small corner of my heart, I believed they were right. But that didn't stop me. 1 month after graduation, while my classmates prepared for freshman orientation, I packed my few belongings into 2 cardboard boxes, loaded them into my beat-up Corolla, and drove to a tiny studio apartment on the edge of town. I was 19, terrified, completely alone. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't suffocating under expectations that never fit me. I was free. People think rejection comes in grand moments, a slammed door, a shouted insult, a dramatic betrayal. But for me, it came quietly in 100 small dismissals that chipped away at my spirit until I almost believed them. After I told my parents I wasn't going to college right away, the house fell into a heavy, punishing silence. My father stopped speaking to me entirely. At dinner, he would address questions to my mother or Eleanor, never to me. When I did speak, his eyes would glaze over as if I were background noise, an annoyance he couldn't be bothered to acknowledge. My mother tried to remain neutral, but even her attempts at comfort felt like daggers dipped in honey. "It's just a phase, Zoe," she whispered one night while washing dishes. The warm scent of lemon soap filled the air. "Once you realize business is unstable and risky, you'll come back to what matters. You're too smart to waste your life like this." Like this. As if following my own path was synonymous with throwing my life away. My father, however, was less subtle. A week before graduation, I printed business cards for my upcoming launch, Zoe Bennett, founder, CEO, Luminate Digital. The logo I designed was minimalistic, elegant, and futuristic. I felt proud holding them in my hands. I showed him the cards over breakfast. He didn't even lift his eyes from his newspaper. "Peddling trinkets and fixing computers isn't a career, Zoe," he said flatly. "Stop embarrassing yourself before it's too late." Embarrassing myself. That phrase burned into my memory like acid. For him, my dreams were shameful, childish, humiliating. An insult to the Bennett family's intellectual pedigree. At school, teachers treated me like I'd lost my mind. When other students discussed college dorms and majors, I was finalizing vendor agreements and inventory systems. "Miss Easons." Hargrave, my calculus teacher, pulled me aside after class one day, her lined face creased with concern. "Zoe," she said softly, "I hear you're not going to college. You're throwing away your future, sweetheart. You're too bright for this. For daring to dream beyond the path they all knew." Sometimes I wondered if they were right. When I lay awake at night in my childhood bedroom, the ceiling fan spinning slow shadows across my walls, doubt curled around my chest like a python. Was I reckless, naive? Was I really about to throw away everything my parents had built for me? But every morning I woke up with the same certainty humming in my veins. I can't live the life they want for me. I'll suffocate. The final blow came on graduation night. I walked across the stage, shaking hands with administrators I'd known since childhood. My parents sat in the front row. Eleanor's old honors cord still hung in her room, a reminder of her perfect journey. When the ceremony ended, families gathered outside taking photos under the giant oak trees. My classmates beamed with acceptance letters and future plans. My parents stood stiffly beside me as a neighbor approached. "Congratulations, Zoe," Mrs. Thompson said brightly. "Where are you headed in the fall? Northwestern, UChicago." My mother forced a tight smile. "Zoe has other plans," she said, her voice low with embarrassment. My father didn't speak. He didn't look at me. He simply walked ahead toward the car, his shoulders stiff, his disappointment radiating off him like heat from asphalt. That was the moment I felt the final crack, the crack that let the light in. Because in that moment, holding my diploma while watching his back retreat toward the parking lot, I realized something powerful. If my dreams were so small they couldn't threaten his expectations, then maybe they weren't dreams worth having. So I made a silent promise to myself. I will build something so undeniable, so extraordinary, that your approval becomes irrelevant. And with that promise echoing in my chest, I stepped into the humid June night, ready to face a world that didn't believe in me. Because I believed in myself. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. I'll never forget the day I moved into my first apartment. It was 98 degrees outside, the kind of heavy Midwestern heat that clings to your skin like wet cloth. I carried 2 cardboard boxes up 3 flights of cracked concrete stairs, my arms trembling with exhaustion by the time I reached the door. The apartment was pathetic. A single room no bigger than my parents' pantry with peeling beige paint and a cracked linoleum floor that curled at the edges like old bread. The kitchen was just a strip of counter wedged between a rusted sink and a miniature fridge that buzzed angrily whenever I plugged it in. The only window faced a brick wall 3 feet away, blocking any hint of sunlight. I set down my boxes, looked around, and felt the burn of tears behind my eyes. The silence was deafening. For 19 years, I'd lived in a house filled with voices, critical, dismissive voices, but voices nonetheless. Here there was only the hum of the fridge and my own ragged breathing. I had just $872 left in my bank account after paying the security deposit and first month's rent. Enough for maybe 3 weeks of food if I was careful. I spent my first night sleeping on a thin yoga mat on the cold floor, my hoodie rolled up as a pillow. I woke up the next morning with a stiff neck and the gnawing ache of doubt in my chest. What the hell am I doing? But there was no time for fear. I had a company to build, or at least an idea to fight for. Luminate AI Solutions wasn't even a company yet. It was just me, a secondhand laptop with a missing R key and a Wi-Fi signal that dropped every hour. I set up my desk, an old folding table I bought for $10 at a yard sale next to the outlet so I could charge my laptop while I worked. My chair was a plastic patio chair someone left by the dumpster downstairs. The first week was brutal. I woke up at 6 a.m. every day, my back aching from the floor, and immediately started cold emailing potential clients, local artisans, small businesses, Etsy shop owners. By noon, rejection emails piled up in my inbox like funeral notices. Some didn't even bother replying. Others responded with thinly veiled disdain. "Who are you again?" "We already use Shopify, thanks. You're 19. I tried to stay positive, but optimism felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. By evening, I'd switched to coding practice. teaching myself advanced backend frameworks through YouTube tutorials and free GitHub repositories. My eyes burned from staring at the flickering laptop screen under the cheap yellow lamp I found at Goodwill. My hands cramped from hours of typing. Dinner was usually dry ramen noodles sprinkled with seasoning powder. Sometimes I'd add a boiled egg for protein if I felt indulgent. I lost 7 pounds in 2 weeks, my jeans sagging around my hips. At night, lying on my yoga mat staring at the water stains spreading across the ceiling, doubt crept in like a slow rot. Maybe my dad was right. Maybe this was just a childish fantasy. One night after a particularly brutal day of rejection calls, I broke down. I pressed my forehead against the cold linoleum floor and sobbed until my throat felt raw. No one heard me. No one comforted me. For the first time in my life, I truly understood what loneliness tasted like. But the next morning, I wiped my face, made a list, and kept going. Because failure wasn't an option. Returning home meant surrendering everything I believed about myself. It meant becoming who they said I was: a disappointment, a failure, a girl too stupid to survive without their guidance. Then 3 weeks in, everything changed just a little, but enough to keep my hope alive. Her name was Lillian. She ran a tiny soap business from her garage, handcrafting floral scented bars wrapped in wax paper. I'd cold emailed her twice, offering to build a proper e-commerce site for her products, automate her inventory, and connect her to bulk gift suppliers. That morning, her reply sat in my inbox: "Hi Zoe, I've been thinking about your proposal. Can you meet tomorrow to discuss Lillian?" I read her email 6 times, my hands shaking. That night, I stayed up until 3 a.m., drafting a pitch deck with mock-ups, projected revenue growth, and competitor analyses. It wasn't fancy, just PowerPoint slides with stock images and data I gathered from late-night research, but it was mine. My proof to the world that I belonged in business. The next day, I wore my cleanest thrift store blouse and borrowed my neighbor's iron to press the collar flat. I walked 2 miles in the sweltering heat to Lillian's address because I couldn't afford the bus fare. When I pitched to her in her lavender-scented garage, my voice trembled, but my vision was clear. I saw the potential in her brand, the scale it could achieve online. For the first time, someone looked at me with curiosity instead of condescension. She agreed to let me build her website. My first client. My first tiny flickering proof of concept. That night I sat on the grimy kitchen floor, eating dry ramen straight from the packet, like chips, staring at the invoice I'd sent her for $300. I felt rich, I felt powerful, I felt unstoppable. Because I realized something important: success doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in small wins that keep you alive until the next battle. And for the first time since moving into that sad little apartment, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't wrong after all. After landing Lillian as my first client, I thought things would start getting easier. They didn't. Building her website was grueling. I spent every waking hour researching SEO optimization for small retailers, integrating payment gateways, learning about customer conversion funnels. There were nights when I'd fall asleep at my keyboard, wake up at 2 a.m. with key imprints on my cheek, and keep coding until sunrise. But when we launched Lillian's site 2 weeks later, something magical happened. Her soap orders tripled within a month. She called me crying tears of joy the morning she woke up to 40 overnight orders from customers across the country. "I didn't think this was possible," she whispered over the phone. I sat there in my dim apartment, staring at my cracked window, trying to process the feelings spreading in my chest. Pride, purpose, a sense that maybe I really could do this. Word started to spread slowly. Lillian told her friend Thomas, a carpenter who crafted custom wood tables and floating shelves in his garage workshop. Thomas called me one evening while I was eating ramen noodles sprinkled with leftover soy sauce packets. "Hey you, the girl who built Lillian's website?" he asked, his voice deep and gruff. "That's me. I replied, trying to sound professional despite sitting cross-legged on the floor in sweatpants. I hadn't washed in a week. You think you could help me sell my tables online? My wife says people pay crazy money for handcrafted these days. The next morning, I biked to his workshop with a pitch deck and wireframes drawn on printer paper because my laptop battery had died overnight and I couldn't afford a replacement yet. He agreed to my proposal, another $400 contract, another small step forward. Soon there was Marta's handmade jewelry shop, then Praya's organic skincare line. 8 local artisans joined Luminate's platform within 3 months. The commissions were small, but they kept my lights on. My bank account stopped hovering dangerously close to overdraft fees. For the first time, I was able to buy real groceries, eggs, spinach, even fresh chicken breasts. I felt like royalty cooking them on my scratched non-stick pan. But every small victory at work came with silent defeat at home. My parents never asked how my business was going. During our increasingly rare phone calls, my mother's voice was always tinged with polite dismissal. "How's the business?" she would ask, pausing before the word as if it tasted sour on her tongue. "It's going well," I'd reply carefully. "We're adding clients. I'm close to covering all my bills this month." "That's nice, dear. Have you thought more about enrolling in community college?" "They have late admission. It's not Northwestern, but at least you'll have a degree." I'd hang up feeling the familiar stone settle in my chest. Thanksgiving that year was brutal. I drove back home in my rusty Corolla, wearing my one nice outfit, black slacks from Goodwill, and a white blouse with a missing button I hid under my hair. Dinner was a showcase of Eleanor's achievements as usual. She had started her medical residency and was already publishing research with her supervising surgeon. Dad carved the turkey with his usual solemn precision, announcing each slice with an Eleanor accomplishment. Dr. Williams says Eleanor has the steadiest hands in the program. When he finally glanced at me, his expression shifted. And Zoe is still selling things online. I opened my mouth to correct him, to explain that I just onboarded my 8th artisan and was finalizing a wholesale partnership for Lillian Soaps with a boutique hotel chain. But before I could speak, Mom interrupted. "Deanne's daughter just started at Cornell," she said brightly, passing me the cranberry sauce without meeting my eyes. "Imagine where you could be now if you'd just gone to school." I stared down at the tablecloth, fighting the sting in my eyes. For a brief moment, I considered telling them about the contracts I'd signed that week, about the partnership meetings I was scheduling with local business associations, about how alive I felt building something real with my own 2 hands. But I didn't, because I knew it wouldn't matter. To them, it was still just selling things online, a hobby, a phase I needed to outgrow. That night back in my tiny apartment, I lay awake on my creaky mattress staring at the ceiling. The radiator clanged and hissed like an angry ghost. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance. I pressed my hand to my chest and felt my heart beating strong and stubborn. They couldn't see it, but I did. I saw the future I was building brick by brick, line of code by line of code. I saw my artisans thriving, my clients gaining confidence, my idea proving itself against every rejection and doubt, and I whispered to myself in the darkness like a prayer, "One day they'll know. But even if they never do, I will." And that's enough to keep going. If I had to pinpoint the moment my life truly began to change, it was the rainy Thursday afternoon I met Margaret Weber. By then, Luminate AI Solutions had grown to represent 15 artisans. I was working 16-hour days, barely sleeping, but the small, steady income streams kept my lights on. My website designs were functional but basic, and while I was proud of what I'd built, I felt like I was bumping up against an invisible ceiling. That's when I forced myself to attend the Lakewood Business Networking event. I almost didn't go. The entry ticket was $50, which was nearly a week of groceries. I sat in my apartment staring at the registration page, the cursor blinking like it was daring me to risk it. Finally, I whispered, "You're going click confirm payment," and instantly felt nauseous. The event was held in a bland hotel ballroom that smelled like burnt coffee and carpet shampoo. Rows of middle-aged men in navy suits and women in sensible pumps milled around exchanging business cards with manicured efficiency. I stood near the coffee table in my thrift store blazer and scuffed flats, clutching a stack of homemade business cards that felt laughably amateur compared to the glossy embossed ones circulating around me. Most people ignored me. A few asked what I did, and when I explained my artisan e-commerce platform, their eyes glazed over. One man actually patted my arm and said, "That's adorable. Good luck with your little website." I wanted to scream. Then I saw her, Margaret Weber, founder and CEO of Weber Softworks, one of the region's most respected software companies. I recognized her immediately from business magazine covers. She was in her late 50s, tall, with cropped silver hair, wearing an elegant black sheath dress and low heels. Her presence radiated calm authority. She was alone at a high-top table sipping tea while scanning the room with sharp eyes. My heart thundered in my chest. "Go. Now. Before you lose your nerve." I walked up to her, hoping my shaking hands weren't obvious. "Hi, Ms. Weber. I'm Zoe Bennett. I just wanted to thank you for your keynote last month at the Women in Tech event. Your story about pitching to 30 investors before getting a single yes really inspired me." She looked up slowly, studying me with an unreadable expression. Then she smiled faintly. "Thank you, Zoe." She said, her voice low and even. "Tell me what you're working on." I launched into my practiced elevator pitch about Luminate AI Solutions, how I built an e-commerce platform connecting local artisans to online buyers, handling their logistics websites and digital marketing for a small commission. My words tumbled out too fast, but she listened intently, her eyes never leaving my face. When I finished breathless, she set her teacup down carefully. "You've got good instincts," she said finally. "But your current model has limited scalability. Selling handcrafted soaps and jewelry online is a start, but it caps your growth." My cheeks burned with embarrassment. I know I need to pivot, but I don't know how. I want to build something bigger, something that actually makes an impact beyond a few $1,000s here and there. She tilted her head, regarding me like a curious puzzle. "Have you considered developing software products for small businesses? Scheduling systems, inventory management, customer relationship tools. They need affordable solutions tailored to their scale. It's a massive, underserved market." My mind exploded with possibilities. I had taught myself enough programming to build e-commerce sites. What if I applied that to business systems? What if Luminate could become more than a sales platform? What if we became an engine powering small business growth? She handed me her card, heavy cardstock with her name embossed in silver. "Call my office. Let's have coffee next week. I want to hear your ideas." I walked out of that hotel ballroom into the cold drizzle with tears stinging my eyes. For the first time in my life, someone powerful hadn't asked where I went to school. She hadn't asked about my GPA or my non-existent degree. She hadn't even cared that I was wearing a thrift store blazer. She cared about my mind, my ideas, my vision. That coffee meeting the following week changed everything. Margaret listened to my rough sketches of software modules, asked probing questions about UI/UX design, scalability, server, infrastructure, topics I barely understood, then scribbling frantic notes as she spoke. "You need a team, Zoe," she said firmly. "A real one. Developers, designers, operations support. If you keep trying to do everything yourself, you'll burn out before you ever build something sustainable. I can't afford to hire anyone." I whispered, ashamed. "Not yet," she said. "But you will. Keep your eyes on B2B SaaS. That's your growth path. Productize your services into recurring revenue. It will change everything." Before I left, she looked at me for a long moment. Her steel gray eyes softened slightly. "You remind me of myself at your age," she said quietly. "Don't let anyone tell you your dreams are too big for your reality. Reality is always negotiable." I walked out of that coffee shop with a fire blazing in my chest, so bright it almost hurt. That night, I opened my laptop and began mapping out what Luminate AI Solutions could become. Not just a marketplace, a company that created tools to empower businesses everywhere. I didn't sleep at all. But for the first time, I wasn't tired. I was alive. The breakthrough I'd been waiting for came in the 4th year of my business. By then, Luminate AI Solutions had pivoted from artisan e-commerce to developing custom software products for small and medium businesses. Scheduling systems, inventory management tools, CRM platforms, I built them all with a scrappy team of 3 part-time developers I could barely afford. Every month felt like gambling rent money at a high-stakes table, but I kept playing. Then one rainy Tuesday morning, my phone buzzed with an email that made my heart stop. Subject: RFP Inventory Management System. It was from Northland Retail, a regional chain with 43 locations across the Midwest. They sold outdoor furniture, garden supplies, and home improvement products. Their outdated software was causing inventory discrepancies and lost revenue. They were seeking proposals for a custom inventory management solution. I sat staring at my cracked laptop screen, barely breathing. This wasn't just another client. This was the kind of contract that could transform Luminate AI Solutions overnight. It could give me the capital to hire a real team, move out of our crumbling shared office space above a laundromat, and finally build the products I'd been dreaming of for years. My lead developer, James, a quiet genius who'd left corporate for startup life, was skeptical. "They're considering IBM and 2 other enterprise vendors," he warned. "We're a team of 4 people, Zoe. Companies like Northland don't take risks like this." "Then we'll work harder than all of them," I said, my pulse pounding. "We've got 2 weeks to prepare. Cancel everything else." This is our moonshot. For 14 days straight, we worked around the clock. We built prototype dashboards, designed sleek user interfaces, ran performance tests on outdated servers that wheezed under the strain. I fueled myself with instant coffee and gas station sandwiches, falling asleep with my laptop on my chest, waking up an hour later to keep working. Finally, pitch day arrived. I walked into Northland's corporate headquarters in my best Navy suit, still thrifted, but tailored to fit. My presentation deck was pristine. My hair was curled into loose waves that screamed confident female founder, though inside my stomach churned with terror. The boardroom smelled of lemon polish and stale coffee. Their CTO, a severe-looking man in his 50s, flicked through my printed proposal with an expressionless face. "You're a very small operation," he said, peering at me over wire-rimmed glasses. "What happens when we need support at 2 a.m. on a Saturday before Memorial Day weekend?" I looked him dead in the eyes. "Then I'll personally answer that call," I said firmly. "And I'll keep answering until your issue is resolved. That's what sets us apart from vendors who see you as just another account." He didn't smile, but he nodded slightly, scribbling a note on his pad. We made it to the final round of vendor selection alongside a major software company that had been in the industry longer than I'd been alive. On the morning of our final presentation, disaster struck. At 4 a.m., James called me, panic in his voice. "Zoe, the demo environment is down. The AWS instance is failing authentication, and our last backup is corrupted." My chest tightened so hard I thought I'd pass out. Without a working demo, we had nothing to show, no proof of concept, nothing but vaporware promises. "Send me all logs," I ordered, my voice shaking as I sat bolt upright in bed, sweat dampening my tank top. "Wake up, Raj and Mia. I'll be at the office in 20 minutes. I drove through empty streets, praying under my breath the entire way. The office lights flickered to life as I sprinted inside. My team sat hunched over their monitors, faces pale in the glow of failing code. For 3 hours, we fought the system like surgeons in an emergency room, typing commands with trembling fingers, restoring partial backups, reconfiguring IAM permissions. Every second that ticked by felt like a guillotine blade swinging lower. At 7:49 a.m., 13 minutes before we had to leave for the pitch, James finally shouted, "It's up!" A cheer erupted through the tiny office. I closed my eyes, tears burning behind my lids. We had done it. Barely. But we had done it. 30 minutes later, I stood in Northland's executive boardroom, smiling confidently as I navigated through our restored demo environment. No one in that room knew that just 3 hours earlier, this entire presentation had been a smoking crater of broken code and corrupted backups. When I finished, the CTO leaned back in his leather chair, studying me for a long, silent moment. "You're scrappy," he said finally. "We like scrappy." 2 days later, Northland signed a $450,000 contract with Luminate AI Solutions. That night, I took my entire team out to dinner at the only decent steakhouse in Lakewood. We ordered sizzling ribeyes and shared a bottle of cheap champagne toasting until we laughed ourselves breathless. For the first time, I allowed myself to believe we might actually make it. That contract didn't just save my company. It validated everything I'd been fighting for. Every sleepless night, every silent dinner with my family, thinking I was a failure, every dollar spent on hope instead of certainty. As I lay in bed that night, exhaustion coursing through my bones, I thought of my father's words. "Peddling trinkets and fixing computers won't get you anywhere, Zoe." I smiled in the darkness, because he was right. Fixing computers didn't get me anywhere, but building solutions, that was taking me everywhere. Success has a way of rewriting the rules you once thought were permanent. A year after landing, Northland Retail Luminate AI Solutions had doubled its client base. We moved out of the cramped office above the laundromat into a real downtown space with glass walls, a reception desk, and my name, Zoe Bennett, founder, CEO, etched on the front door. Sometimes I'd arrive early just to stand there in the quiet lobby, letting it sink in. I built this. Around that time, my mother called me late one night, her voice unusually small. "Your father's been let go," she said softly. "University budget cuts. They're eliminating his entire department." I closed my eyes, the memories flooding back him, sitting at the dining table, grading papers, lecturing me about wasted potential, measuring worth by academic prestige. "He's too young to retire," she continued, her voice shaking. "And I've been having these headaches. The doctor wants to run more tests. Our insurance, it's not great." She didn't ask for help outright. My parents never would. Their pride was a fortress, built brick by brick over decades. But the desperation behind her words was unmistakable. That night, I sat in my office long after everyone had gone home, staring at the city lights outside. My chest ached with a confusing swirl of emotions: resentment, compassion, anger, love. They had spent years dismissing my career, calling it a phase, a hobby, a failure. And yet here I was, the only one with the means to help them. The next morning, I called my lawyer. Within weeks, we established a trust that began paying their mortgage directly each month. They believed it was part of Dad's university severance package. When Mom's medical tests revealed a chronic condition requiring expensive treatment not fully covered by insurance, I set up a medical assistance fund that paid her hospital bills directly to the provider. Dad eventually found part-time adjunct work at a small community college, but the pay was a fraction of his old salary. So I created a shell consulting company under Luminate's corporate structure that hired him to review educational materials for business training modules work that didn't actually exist but gave him dignity and a steady paycheck. When Eleanor had twins 2 years later, I anonymously established education funds for them under the guise of a family friend's investment gift. All the while, I maintained my carefully constructed facade. During family dinners, I downplayed every success. The business is doing fine, I'd say casually while swirling pasta on my fork, ignoring the fact that we had just signed $1 million software contract. My father would nod absently before turning to Eleanor to ask about her latest surgical rotation. At night, back in my apartment, I'd sit alone staring at the ceiling, wondering if they'd ever see me. Really see me. But deep down, I knew they never would. To them, my path would always be illegitimate, unworthy, an embarrassment hidden under the polite label of self-employment. Still, month after month, I paid their mortgage, their medical bills, and my father's consulting salary. Because I wasn't doing it for their approval anymore. I was doing it because I could. Because despite everything, they were still my family. And because my success in the end wasn't about proving them wrong, it was about proving myself right. By the time I turned 32, Luminate AI Solutions had become something I once only dreamed about on sleepless nights lying on my yoga mat in that tiny apartment. We weren't just building custom software anymore. Under James's leadership as CTO and with Margaret's mentorship, we developed a proprietary AI analytics platform called Insight Edge that revolutionized how small and medium businesses understood customer behavior, transforming massive data pools into clear, actionable insights. Companies that once struggled to compete against retail giants could now optimize inventory, predict sales trends, and design marketing campaigns like billion-dollar corporations, all because of our platform. We grew fast. Faster than I'd ever thought possible. Within 8 years of launching from that peeling linoleum kitchen floor, Luminate AI Solutions had over 200 employees across 3 cities. Our valuation climbed past $75 million after a strategic investment round led by major venture capital firms. Sometimes I'd stand at the window of our new headquarters, a sleek glass building with panoramic city views, watching the sun set over the skyline, feeling both proud and overwhelmed. My team bustled around me, engineers discussing neural networks, designers mocking up interfaces, account managers finalizing onboarding documents for our latest clients. All of them looked to me, a girl without a degree, without traditional credentials for direction, vision, and strategy. And I delivered, every single day. Yet despite the company's meteoric rise, my personal life remained carefully curated. I still drove a practical hybrid sedan instead of the luxury SUV I could easily afford. My apartment, though spacious and modern, was intentionally modest. I avoided media interviews, and when business publications profiled Luminate, I insisted they exclude detailed personal photos. The only indulgence I allowed myself was my beach house in Sarasota, Florida, a beautiful modern property overlooking the Gulf of Mexico with floor-to-ceiling windows and soft white sand steps away from my back patio. Officially, it was listed as a rental property investment through a shell holding company. In reality, it was my sanctuary. The one place I could exist without judgment, without hiding my success, without feeling like an imposter in my own life. Meanwhile, my family continued their quiet dependence. Mom's treatments remained covered under the medical trust. Dad's consulting work continued depositing payments into his account each month. Eleanor's kids went to a prestigious private preschool funded by anonymous scholarships. None of them knew the truth behind their stability. At family gatherings, the old dynamic never changed. Eleanor updated everyone on her surgical innovations. Dad beamed with pride, and Mom gushed about the twins' milestones. And Zoe, Dad would say, turning to me with polite disinterest, "Still fixing computers?" "Yeah," I'd reply softly, twirling my fork in my salad, ignoring the fact that I had just turned down a $30 million acquisition offer the previous week. To them, my business was still a hobby, a phase, a path that could never match the dignity of medicine or academia. And maybe that was okay, because at night, as I stood barefoot on my Florida balcony watching the waves crash under the moonlight, I realized something. I wasn't building this company for them. I wasn't proving anything to my father anymore. I wasn't chasing Eleanor's shadow or my mother's polite disappointment. I was building it for me, for the people my company served, for every small business owner who stayed awake at 3 a.m. worrying about payroll, just like I once stayed up coding websites to buy ramen noodles. Because if my journey had taught me anything, it was this: success isn't measured by the people who refuse to see you. It's measured by the lives you change, starting with your own. And as the ocean breeze lifted my hair that night, I smiled into the darkness, whispering to myself, we're just getting started. Thanksgiving had always been a performance in my family. The table set perfectly with Mom's polished china. Eleanor arriving in her tailored navy dress, her husband Michael close behind their twins, clinging to their legs like obedient little ducklings. Dad carving the turkey with surgical precision while reciting Eleanor's accolades like a priest delivering scripture. This year felt different. I arrived early carrying 2 bags, one filled with my usual contributions, homemade cranberry sauce and a pecan pie, and the other containing the documents I never thought I'd show them. Company valuations, Forbes profiles, contract summaries. Proof of everything I had built while they rolled their eyes and changed the subject. As I walked up the familiar brick steps to my childhood home, my hands trembled slightly. For years, I told myself it didn't matter if they knew, that their approval was irrelevant. But the truth was, I still craved it. Like an old wound craves the sting of salt. Dinner proceeded in the usual script. Eleanor detailed her upcoming surgical research presentation, while Dad beamed with pride, interrupting only to share how her hospital board had shortlisted her for department head. Mom gushed about the twins' preschool reading milestones. No one asked about me, not once. Finally, as Dad finished pouring the wine, I cleared my throat. There's something I'd like to share. I said, my voice surprisingly steady. They all turned to me, their expressions politely expectant, like they were bracing for an announcement about adopting a rescue dog or taking up pottery. My company, Luminate AI Solutions, was valued at $75 million last quarter. Silence. It was as if I'd spoken in a language none of them understood. Dad frowned, setting down the bottle. What are you talking about, Zoe Luminate? My tech company. We developed an AI analytics platform that's revolutionizing how small businesses handle customer data. We have over 200 employees. We're expanding internationally next year. I reached into my bag and pulled out the Forbes magazine, sliding it across the table to him. My photo, confident, powerful, real, stared back from the page. He didn't pick it up. Instead, he let out a small, bitter laugh. So, this is what you've been doing, scamming businesses online, selling their data. My chest tightened. No, Dad, it's legitimate, completely legitimate. You can see our patents, our SEC filings enough. He snapped, his voice rising. You expect us to believe this, that you who never even finished college built a $75 million company? Do you think we're stupid? Mom looked pale, her eyes darting between us nervously. Eleanor just sat frozen, staring at the magazine like it might bite her. I didn't tell you because my voice cracked, but I forced it to remain strong. Because every time I showed a glimpse of what I was building, it was dismissed. A hobby, a phase. I was tired of fighting for you to believe in me. Dad pushed his chair back so abruptly it screeched against the hardwood. He stood trembling with rage. Get out. Get out of this house right now. Dad, get out, he shouted, pointing to the door. His face was twisted eyes, bloodshot with humiliation and fury. You're nothing but uneducated trash, a liar. I don't care how much money you say you have. You're still worthless to me. For a moment, no one moved. The only sound was the ticking of Mom's antique wall clock. Then, with a strange calm, I gathered the documents back into my bag. I looked at Eleanor, who still hadn't spoken, her expression unreadable. I looked at Mom, tears pooling in her eyes, but she said nothing to stop me. I walked to the door. My hands were no longer trembling. As I stepped out into the icy November night, a strange lightness washed over me. The wind bit my cheeks, making my eyes water, but I didn't cry. Because in that moment, I realized something I should have understood years ago. Their love was conditional. Their approval was conditional. Their pride was conditional. And I was done living conditionally. That night alone in my quiet Florida beach house, I poured myself a glass of red wine and sat on the balcony overlooking the moonlit ocean. The waves crashed against the shore with steady, defiant power, as if whispering, "You did it anyway." And I smiled into the darkness, feeling freer than I ever had in my entire life. Because for the first time, I wasn't building for them. I was building for me. The morning after Thanksgiving felt different. For the first time in years, I woke up without the gnawing ache in my chest, that anxious churn of wondering what my father thought of me, if my mother was disappointed, if Eleanor was silently judging. I opened my eyes to the pale gold sunrise flooding my Florida bedroom and felt only one thing relief. I sat on the edge of my bed, toes sinking into the cool wood floors, listening to the quiet rush of waves outside. My phone buzzed endlessly with missed calls and voicemails from my parents, from Eleanor, from unknown numbers back home. I didn't listen to a single one. Instead, I called Lawrence, my lawyer. Terminate all financial arrangements immediately. I said, my voice calm and unwavering, the mortgage payments, the medical fund, Dad's consulting contract, Eleanor's kids' education trust, all of it. There was a brief pause. "Zoe, are you sure?" he asked gently. "This will change their lives significantly." I know I whispered, my eyes burning with the first tears I'd shed since that dinner, but they made their position clear. They want nothing to do with my low-life money. I'm respecting that. That day I packed up my apartment in Lakewood. Movers boxed up my old thrift store furniture, the dishes I'd collected piece by piece from Goodwill, the books with dog-eared pages and scribbled notes in the margins. As I walked through the empty rooms, echoes of past versions of myself clung to the peeling walls, the 19-year-old girl sleeping on a yoga mat, the 23-year-old coding until dawn, the 28-year-old signing her first $1 million contract. I whispered a quiet thank you to her, to all of them, because every desperate, exhausted, lonely version of me had built the woman I was now. When I arrived at my Florida beach house that evening, the sun was setting in a blaze of orange and fuchsia across the horizon. I stepped out onto the balcony, inhaling the salt air deep into my lungs. This is mine, I thought. Not gifted, not approved, not inherited. Built. On Monday, I called a company-wide meeting over Zoom. My leadership team filled the screen, their faces glowing with curiosity. I'm relocating to Florida permanently, I announced. Our headquarters will open here next quarter. James will handle day-to-day operations in Lakewood. I'll travel monthly. This company is growing beyond anything we imagined, and it's time I live where I can think clearly and lead fully. For a second, silence reigned. Then Rachel, our marketing director, smiled. "We support you, Zoe," she said softly. "Wherever you lead us, we'll follow." That afternoon, I walked along the shoreline barefoot, letting the cold water lap against my ankles. I watched pelicans dive for fish, felt the breeze whip my hair across my face, tasted the salt on my lips. And for the first time in my life, I felt untethered. I was no longer trying to prove anything to anyone. I wasn't desperately clawing for approval or shrinking myself to soothe fragile egos. I wasn't hiding my brilliance or softening my voice to avoid making others uncomfortable. I was just me, Zoe Bennett, founder and CEO of a $75 million company. A daughter, a sister, a woman who chose freedom over permission. That night, as I sat on the deck sipping tea under a sky scattered with stars, my phone buzzed with one final voicemail from my father. His voice shook with rage and desperation. You can't do this to us. You think you're powerful now, but one day you'll fail. And when you do, don't come crawling back." I deleted the message without listening to the end. For once, his threats held no power over me. I wasn't theirs to break anymore. I stood breathing in the vast darkness of the ocean. The waves roared like a promise in the quiet night. Because I knew with a certainty deeper than his voice had ever cut that even if I fell tomorrow, I'd rise again, and again, and again. Because true freedom isn't about never falling, it's about never again asking permission to stand back up. 6 months after that Thanksgiving dinner, I woke up to the gentle warmth of the Florida sun streaming through my bedroom windows. The ocean outside sparkled like a field of diamonds, waves rolling in rhythmic whispers against the sand. My mornings here were different, peaceful, unrushed. I no longer woke up to my phone buzzing with panicked reminders of mortgage payments for people who despised me. I no longer forced myself into a role that shrank me down just to fit someone else's definition of worthy. Instead, I woke up as myself. Zoe Bennett, founder and CEO of Luminate AI Solutions, a company now valued at over $80 million. An innovator, a leader, a woman who finally chose her own voice over the expectations that once imprisoned her. Life blossomed in ways I never expected. Our Sarasota headquarters opened with sweeping views of the Gulf glass walls that filled the space with light and collaborative work pods where my team thrived. Several employees from Lakewood relocated to join me, bringing their families' dreams and energy to build something bigger together. I started mentoring young founders, especially women who'd been told they weren't smart enough, educated enough. I created the Luminate Rise Scholarship, awarding funding to underrepresented entrepreneurs, regardless of degrees, focusing instead on vision, grit, and the courage to take risks. One afternoon, as I stood on stage announcing our scholarship recipients, I looked out at the sea of bright faces. Some were community college students, others were single mothers building side hustles late into the night. All of them carried that familiar flicker in their eyes, determination mixed with fear. I spoke into the microphone, my voice strong and clear. Success doesn't require permission. It requires relentless belief in yourself, even when no one else believes in you. The applause filled my chest with a warmth that lingered long after I left the stage. In the evenings, I found solace in simple joys. Walking barefoot on the cool sand at twilight, feeling the ocean breeze lift my hair, cooking dinner with Ethan, the environmental engineer. I met at a beach cleanup, the first man who looked at me, not with suspicion about my wealth, but curiosity about my mind. We spent quiet nights on the balcony, sipping wine under the stars, talking about AI applications for environmental restoration and which constellations guided ancient sailors. He once told me, "You're the first woman I've dated whose ambition feels like oxygen instead of competition." I smiled, thinking, this is what peace feels like. My family, meanwhile, faded into distant echoes. The angry voicemails turned into guilty messages, then desperate letters. My father wrote once, a rare apology woven between lines of wounded pride. My mother called her voice hesitant, asking about the beach house as if it were a foreign country. Eleanor texted one morning simply, "I'm sorry for never seeing you." It wasn't a grand reconciliation. It wasn't the healing moment movie endings promise, but it was enough. Enough to soften the edges of the old pain without reopening wounds I'd fought so hard to close. Because I realized something standing on that quiet Florida beach under a blood orange sunset. I no longer needed their approval to validate my existence. My worth was no longer tethered to their expectations. My dreams were no longer confined within their definitions of success. I was free to build, free to love, free to fail and rise again without shame, free to live authentically, unapologetically, fiercely as myself. As I watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky with golds, pinks, and purples, I whispered a silent prayer of gratitude for every rejection that fueled my determination, for every sleepless night that sharpened my vision, for every moment I almost gave up, but chose to keep going. Because in the end, I learned that real success isn't about proving them wrong. It's about becoming so completely unapologetically yourself that their opinions no longer matter. It's about choosing peace over approval, freedom over conformity, truth over comfort. That night, as Ethan wrapped his arm around my waist and the waves roared in the darkness, I closed my eyes and smiled. Because this was my life now, authentic, unburdened, entirely mine. And for the first time ever, I knew that was enough.